Thanks once again for joining us for this edition of Alaska Weather on this 29th day of September 2019. And I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show once again. Up first has this weather graphic showing the red illuminated area here. That's the Alaska Range, eastern central Alaska Range. That's a high wind warning that's out until 10 p.m. this evening. And in the forecast there through the passes, the higher passes, gusts as high as 70 miles per hour, and that's until 10 p.m. and then things will drop off even at the higher elevations. And then the western Alaska Range here, that's a wind advisory for wind gusting to 60 miles an hour, and in this case that lasts until 4 a.m. Monday morning. And then wind advisory here still out for the Upper Tanana Valley and 40-mile country. That's for winds gusting, winds sustained 15 to 25 miles an hour, but there will be gusts in areas as high as 40 miles an hour. And that's out until, also ends at 10 p.m. this evening, along with the warning for the Alaska Range. And otherwise, no watches, warnings, or advisories weather-wise for anywhere else in the state, around the state for the next 24 hours. And for satellite imagery, you can see still a fairly nice day here over the southeast coast, getting an increase in high stuff to the north there, but no precipitation yet. At least I don't think it's raining yet at Yakutat, but this area of rain shifting eastward. You can see good south to north flow pulling moisture due north with upper level ridging here coming up into the interior, but the entire pattern shifting eastward. So the south to north flow is gradually shifting eastward as well. And the heavier rain we had today along the frontal boundary here from southern Kodiak Island, Akiak, picking about 0.8 of an inch of precipitation, and then 1.5 inches of rain falling at both Pedro Wood Bay and Iliamna, and that was in a 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. Sunday afternoon. That's slowly shifting eastward, already increasing right now over the south central Alaska area. And winds pretty gusty as well in some areas, turning an arm in the higher elevations of East Anchorage. For example, winds gusting to 50 miles an hour at Glen Alps there in the Chugach Range, just east of Anchorage. And in turning an arm, McHugh Creek had gusts at 81 miles per hour. That's by far the strongest wind gust anywhere reported anywhere in the state today. And then let's see, I mentioned the 50 miles an hour. Let's see, 45 miles an hour to the southeast at Palmer. Rainfall about 0.6 of an inch falling at Kenai today so far, and only a 1/4 inch there at Kodiak. And lighter amounts of rain, kind of widespread though. McGrath had about 1/2 inch of rain, as well as the central interior there. A good amount of moisture pushing in. Soaking rains reported, again, 12-hour rainfall amounts around 1/2 inch, both at Manly Hot Springs and over at Tanana. About 1/10 of an inch over at Fairbanks, but you'll probably pick up some more as this whole mess shifts eastward tonight, even though it'll gradually weaken. And on the chart today, we had a weak low here form along the frontal boundary just east of Kodiak, and that brought the rain in there today, but already starting to taper off now as that just pulls off the coast there a little bit, and the wind flow becomes more northwest and conditions dry out. Heavier rain, actually not quite this far east as I have it marked here, but will be this evening and overnight tonight. But as I just mentioned, the rainfall, kind of a widespread area of rain here over much of the central and western interior, although breaking out here down across Bristol Bay with more showers and rain, low clouds, fog, drizzle, and winds, really nothing significant here wind-wise. Just kind of a lower flying condition like marginal VFR to IFR conditions with precipitation. And that just scatters out the showers there toward Nikolsky, and another small batch of moisture there, the weak trough sliding down the eastern side of this weak ridging taking place over the far western Aleutians. And for tonight, we'll see this low tracks northeastward. They're just south of the North Gulf Coast, so the moderate to possibly heavy rain will shift eastward in toward Yakutat, and rain chances will increase here along the north coast of the Panhandle, especially toward morning, and clouds will increase to a certain extent down south. Areas of rain or showers scattered across Copper River Basin. Winds will diminish considerably. Here you can see a distinct lack of the gradient as this low pushes eastward. The 40-mile-an-hour gust you had this afternoon in Gulkana may go light and variable here later tonight. And of course, that'll end along the Alaska Range. And it may be already coming down right now as we speak, but the warning is out until 10 p.m. And then this trough back here to the west could bring the winds up a little bit, maybe gusts 25 to 30 miles an hour with periods of rain and fog with that, and damp conditions extend down to a few showers. Again, for the Fox Islands, that's about the cutoff point there. Otherwise, clearing out. Kodiak Island with light northwest breezes, west-northwest breezes, a little bit of clearing possible here between these two systems. There looks like the Kuskokwim Valley, definitely the rainfall shutting off, and then even a wider spread area of no precipitation with this ridging here taking place between this trough and then the next system pushing in. Well, actually, it's way back up. They're just exiting the Kamchatka Peninsula there, the frontal boundary, and there's a weak trough with some moisture sliding up to the northeast in this area. And for tomorrow, that'll be a little bit better organized of a system there with rain and increasing southwest winds into the western Aleutians as well as the Bering Sea. Ridging shifts eastward, begins to take over the northern Bering Sea here, down across, eventually getting into the Pribilofs. There's some fairly nice conditions with this area of moisture slipping eastward. So it stays cloudy and showery with areas of light rain here over the western interior. No heavy amounts, but this low center up here, that'll probably kick the winds up. Precipitation will likely be a little heavier up here over the western North Slope, Brooks Range, Arctic coastal areas there, and could see winds gusting 30, 35 miles an hour or so, give or take. By contrast, dry conditions, some sunshine, and no wind over the eastern interior. We still have a low center tomorrow afternoon south of the Kenai Peninsula. Front, though, pushing eastwards, rain, moderate, maybe heavy at times for Yakutat, but nothing unusually heavy. And then rain continues to increase over mostly the central and northern southeast coast, and clouds having a tough time getting down into the southeast part of the Panhandle. But for the next day, that rain and clouds will definitely cover the entire southeast coast from the Queen Charlottes right up into the Yukon here. With this, another low system develops as the original one actually tracks up to about this position here, just padded in as a triple point feature along the frontal boundary. But that means some precipitation might spill over the eastern Alaska Range into the Tok Northway area. I don't think it'll get as far north as Eagle, but there is a chance of that anyway. Better chance south of the Alaska Range, cloudy, periods of light rain, south central Alaska. Kodiak Island kind of split there. Fognak Island looks like it'll be in the rain band, and then down toward Akiak and Shalikoff Strait. Northwest winds increasing in the afternoon with drying conditions, a dry slot here over the western interior. Upper level trough, rain or snow possible here for the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. Pretty good trough with that, but I don't think the precipitation will be too heavy. It's just a question of whether the temperatures will get cold enough for it to be all snow or continue to be a mixture. Weak system here, not really real light rain with it. Not even as strong as what I have drawn here. A warm front, just periods of light rain, fog, or drizzle, and that's about it. And wind's not much of a factor. The low center way up there in the Russian Far East. Not bad over the central and eastern Aleutians here in the warm sector of the system. Sunshine and mild temperatures. Lows tonight, upper 20s, lower 30s through the Brooks Range. Otherwise, 30s to mid 40s when you get into the Tanana Valley. And looks like mostly 30s, North Slope and the Arctic coast. And the Panhandle, 40s. Southern Alaska, 40s. Alaska Peninsula in the 40s. Highs for tomorrow, 40s to lower 50s here for much of southern Alaska. Maybe some upper 50s like at Seward. And 40s to lower 50s for the Panhandle. Upper 30s Brooks Range, 40s for the Arctic coast. Lows the following morning. Notice all above freezing there for the Arctic coast, and mid-20s though for the Brooks Range, higher elevations. Cooling back a little bit below the frost point there for the Koyukuk and upper Yukon valleys, but lower to mid-30s central interior, 40s southern Alaska, and lower 50s for the Panhandle. And then for the afternoon, highs 55 or 50 to near 60 for the southeast coast, and in the 40s and 50s elsewhere.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Flying weather for Monday morning. Marginal VFR with isolated areas of IFR out here over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians, and patch of VFR here just north of the central Aleutians, southwest of the Pribilofs. IFR, Yukon Delta, right up into the northwest interior to the central Arctic coast, south side of the Berks Range. IFR also here, Prince William Sound in toward the Wrangell Mountains, and approaching the Panhandle, marginal VFR overspreading the northern Panhandle later tonight. And then for the afternoon, that doesn't make much headway farther south, except along the coast here down to about Port Alexander. IFR increasing on the north coast, Yakutat IFR, North Gulf Coast, some lingering marginal possible areas of the Alaska Range, otherwise improving here, VFR, Southern Alaska, Bristol Bay. Marginal, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, areas of marginal VFR northward, and you get into kind of an IFR situation here up along the central Arctic coast. A swath of VFR here, right through the east central Bering Sea to the Fox Islands over to Atka, and then marginal with isolated IFR on out to the west. And then for Tuesday, those two narrow bands of IFR kind of consolidate and amplify and move eastward here right up to the Pribilof Islands by Tuesday morning, extending back into the western Aleutians. Marginal VFR everywhere else out there. And actually inland across much of interior Alaska as well, Kodiak Island and part of Bristol Bay still VFR, and the southern part of the southeast coast with not much IFR off the coast. Zone here along the Alaska Range to the Talkeetnas, extending down, looks like into Valdez, and some IFR up over the western central Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. And for the afternoon on Tuesday, that IFR now retreats off the coast there. So just marginal VFR from the crest of the Brooks Range, or actually maybe south side a little bit there, on out to the coast. Southern Alaska here, pretty well marginal. Kodiak Island still holding VFR there, and northern Bristol Bay up toward Iliamna, and then a narrow VFR zone up here over the the northern Kobuk, Koyukuk, and upper Yukon Valley. Otherwise marginal VFR, Bering Sea with some IFR farther to the west. Anaktuvik, marginal VFR tomorrow with IFR on the southern approach. that same pattern and forecast, good for Adigan as well. Marginal VFR, IFR possible southern entrance. Lake Clark, Merrill, both starting out marginal, improving to VFR at some point in the day tomorrow. That same trend is good for Rainy as well, starting out with lower conditions, improving to VFR. And windy, same trend, lowest in the morning, best in the afternoon. And Isabel as well. Well, actually, Isabel reversed, starting out VFR, and looks like some moisture may slip on up and go marginal in the afternoon. And for Mentasta, occasional marginal VFR throughout the day tomorrow. And for Tanita, I think it'll be VFR tomorrow throughout much of the day, but watch out for marginal VFR conditions at times from morning to late afternoon. And then for Portage, improving conditions, kind of an optimistic forecast here. I'll go VFR with marginal VFR possible in the eastern entrance. Chilkoot and White, marginal VFR gradually becoming IFR throughout the day. Freezing levels, 12,000 feet, right up across the southeast coast there, very warm air aloft, 10,000 feet up to Montague Island here in the Gulf of Alaska. Gradient here across Kodiak Island kind of signifies a frontal boundary in through there with 4,000 feet out to the west for the western interior across the Bering Sea. And then the freezing levels bounce back up under southerly flow there, way out toward the Komodorskis. And then with that, some icing, really not affecting anything Alaska-wise. Pretty good out over the Bering Sea and the Aleutians. Areas of light rime icing, maybe scattered here from the Alaska Peninsula, a little more widespread up here over the northwest part of the state. Heaviest stuff's going to be in over the Panhandle, and then due to this ridge gradually moving through southerly flow, 9,000 foot winds, south 30 knots, and let me go to 3,000 feet here, about the same as 9,000. We've got a low in the Gulf of Alaska. Southerlies 25 knots, increasing along the coast here, and then northwest up to 30 across the Alaska Peninsula, and also another windy area up there, that low on the Brooks range on out to the Arctic coast. We've got some moderate chop up there, the Alaska Peninsula, western Aleutians, and right along the southeast coast.
Welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service, and joining us today, two more people to talk about the augmented reality sandbox. It's Alana Valaji. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks mechanical engineering student, helped design and work on the details to make this new type of sandbox there. Thanks for joining us, Alana. Thanks. And Courtney Breest, she's the outreach coordinator for AKwx, which is the experimental program to stimulate competitive research. It's a program funded nationally by the National Science Foundation, right?
Yes.
Okay. Alana, tell us about how you changed and adapted this version of the augmented reality sandbox. It's a really cool tool.
So Gina approached us with 3 goals for this new version of the sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted it to be compact in a light system that could travel around the state. They wanted it to be child-oriented, so we designed the sandbox to have 3 different levels.
Okay.
It's pretty cool. You can have younger children, you can have high school kids. I guess I should say high school teenagers.
Sure.
And then we also designed it to be more marketable, user-friendly, so that this could be seen eventually in classrooms all over the place, all over the state.
Okay. And you had a big hand in this, but this was a team approach, right?
Definitely. It was a really good experience for myself, for George Stevens, who we'll see later.
One of our hand models today. Yeah.
For 2 other members who aren't here today, Cody Klingman and Austin Hunt. And it was just a really good learning experience all around.
Very good. And this is something that is part of your learning experience as well, so you get to check a box in your education.
Yeah,
right?
it's a requirement for seniors of mechanical engineering at University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Very good. Very good. Well, it is a wonderfully inquisitive tool, fun to play with, and I hope to get my hands in the sand here in just a little bit. But it's also part of a bigger program, something that we were talking about a moment ago, AKwx, and that's what Courtney is here to tell us more about. What is AKwx, and why do you need a sandbox?
Well, AKwx, as you mentioned, is a national program. We're funded nationally, but we're actually located statewide. We're at UAF, we're at UAA, we're in Southeast at UAS. And she mentioned, you know, taking the sandbox as an educational tool, and that's where I'm an outreach coordinator for the South Central test case.
Okay.
Our focus is on the Kenai watershed, and we are really interested in using these tools like the sandbox to interact with the students down there and get them interested in STEM and also communicate the research findings that we've been having throughout the state.
Okay. And one of those, as George and Eric are kind of changing the contours for us there from UAF to maybe something that resembles a little bit of something more of the Kenai watershed, which is one of your focuses for the study, right? And specifically looking at some of the changes there and how that impacts people and also the salmon.
Yes, it is all of our research is social and environmental.
Okay.
So we have social scientists working hand in hand with our environmental scientists. One of the things we're studying is Upper Russian Lake, and we have a researcher taking sediment cores from that lake. So one of the things we're going to use the sandbox to communicate is how the landscape changed over a long period of time, thousands of years, going from glacier, covered by glacier ice, to being filled with water. And then
that's what they're doing right now.
Exactly. So
live.
So they're moving
cool.
the water around. And then I think they've got some props over there, because we're also going to go a little bit more in depth and explain how the salmon got there.
Okay.
So using
there's
these,
the salmon.
Exactly. Oh, I think there's a few more.
Yeah, we like more salmon in Alaska. More salmon.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taking the findings from our research grant and just trying to connect with the community and translate it in a really hands-on and exciting way, so people can, you know, interact with us as much as possible.
Well, sure. That makes the learning and the science real and quite literally in your face, rather than just some boring black and white paper that you have to read about. This is something that people can understand better because it's visual and they're touching and feeling and seeing these changes, right?
Yeah, and get them engaged. And then outreach is a huge component, and working with the younger students, and actually even, I mean, working with the UAF graduate and engineering students it's a huge part of our grant, and we really enjoy it.
No, it is wonderfully exciting. And so, Alana, you were telling us that this is built to travel.
Right.
And this is built to do more things than version 1. Where can this type of project go in Alaska? And what can it demonstrate?
I mean, we were hoping to eventually get to villages that were harder to reach. that you couldn't necessarily move a whole fixed instrument to, right?
Right.
You need something that can pack up, fit in your truck bed. I mean, one of the most attractive parts of this project is that this was going to be something that was used past our graduation point. You know, this is going to be something that lives in the state for years.
Right, right. Well, it looks like you're well on your way with that. So what are, give me another example. What else can this show us? We've talked about the Kenai River watershed. What's the coolest thing that you've played in the sand with? What's your idea?
Well, I definitely enjoy the props, but we also like kind of building up a giant mound, and if you put some water behind it, you can make a little runway, I guess, and you know, demonstrate the effects of the hydrology by just putting up a dam and letting it all pour right down.
Okay.
And so that could, I think you mentioned it earlier, you could even demonstrate the effects of a tsunami.
Right.
Or something along those lines.
So it's not just topography, but it's also hydrology
Yes.
and coastal surge mapping and some of the coastal changes that we're seeing here in Alaska, and seeing what the smaller changes in the sandbox might do to kind of a real effect of a slosh or a push of water up on the coast. Tsunami inundation mapping, or even glacial dam release, as some has been demonstrated before.
Yep.
So wow, that's just an impressive thing. That it seems like the possibilities are nearly endless with this, and probably even more ideas that are popping up in your head too.
Yeah, as we speak.
Very cool. All right. Well, if folks want to get more information about EPSCOR, you guys are online. You're on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. AKEPSCOR, right? EPSCOR, Alaska EPSCOR, that is. And again, you guys are funded by the National Science Foundation,
Yes,
so
we are.
more to come from that, and a longer-term study there. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Congratulations on your hard work there. This is really fun. And for now, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with this edition of Alaska Weather Facts, and I'm going to go play in the sandbox there. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of difference, except it looks like we lost this area that was extending southward, is now appears to be gone. So not a lot of change expected over the next 4 or 5 days again, as it's kind of in that period where the minimum's been reached, and then there's that slow transition where it starts expanding again. So probably not much of a change over the next week or so. For the coastal water forecast, south coast southerlies 20 to 30 knots, seas 6 to 7 feet. South southerly gales, in the case of the north coast here, gale force gales of 40 knots from the south, and then southeast sustained 35. They're up toward Yakutat. Lynn Canal, gale force gusts out of the south as high as 35 knots. And for the central and southern inside waters, southeast 15 and seas 3 feet. Outlook for Tuesday. Clarence Strait, small craft advisories coming up considerably there to 30 knots out of the southeast, seas building to 8 feet. Central and northern inside waters, southeast 15 knots with seas at about 4 feet. We've got gales on the south coast, 35 knots, 11-foot seas. And then small craft advisories here for the remainder of the coastline. Southwest 30 knots on the central coast, and then the north side there, 25 knots with seas up to 12 feet. Prince William Sound tomorrow, lighter winds than what you had today, set north at 15, 3-foot seas. And it looks like this will probably be northeast at 30 with 8-foot seas there. Arrow fell off. And north at 20 here for the western North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories for both Kamishak Bay and the Barren Islands. Both will have northwest winds at 25 with seas as high as 8 feet around the Barrens. Southern Cook Inlet, north 20, north 15 for northern Cook Inlet. And then on Tuesday, gales here for Cook Inlet. That's a big increase here for northern Cook Inlet. North winds 40 knots with 10-foot seas, north 35 knots south of the Forelands there. And then up to 45 knots from the northwest, Kamishak Bay right across the Barren Islands. And then swinging around here, kind of a sheer or a big change in the wind direction. East 30 knots for the western North Gulf Coast, southeast 30 for the east side there, and Prince William Sound, east winds coming up to 25 knots, seas 6 feet. Kodiak Island tomorrow, northwest 20 knots, seas 4 to 7 feet. Alaska Peninsula, northwest 20 to 25 knots with 6 to 7 foot seas. Bristol Bay, northwest at 20, seas 4 feet. Moving on to Tuesday, winds come up, west 35 knots on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, 30 knots on the Bering Sea side, seas 10 feet. Northwest 30 for Bristol Bay with 10-foot seas, and then Sitkanack to Castle Cape and up Shelikof Strait. Full gales, northwest 40 knots, 10 to 15-foot seas. 45 knots out of the northwest there on the east side of Kodiak Island. Probably see some storm force gusts coming out of some of the bays. And for the Fox Islands, Unalaska Island, northwest 20 to 25. Unimak Island, west 15 to 20. West 20 for Atka as well as Adak. And then southwest 20 knots here from the area west of Adak over to about Kiska. Kiska to Shimia, southwest 25, 9-foot seas. And then on Tuesday, 20-knot winds there from Shimia eastward all the way to Adak and Atka. All 20 knots from the southwest with 5 to 7-foot seas. And west-southwest 15 to 20 knots here for the eastern Aleutians, seas running 5 to 7 feet. And for the southwest coast, Yukon Delta coast, northwest 20 knots, St. Lawrence Island, northwest 15, west 20 for Norton Sound, southwest 25, small craft advisories for the northern Bering Sea, Pribilofs northwest at 15, and south of Nunivak Island, west at 20. Those will pick up to 25 knots though on Tuesday. For the Kuskokwim Delta coast, west 20 for the Pribilofs, southwest 20 for the northern Bering Sea, and south 20 also for St. Lawrence Island. For the Arctic coast, east side, east-southeast 20 to 25 knots, sustained 25 out of the east for the central coast, swinging around to the northwest here on the west side, 25 knots, all the way down to Wales with seas running 6 to 7 feet. And for Tuesday, south, 20 to 25 knots from Wales up to Cape Beaufort, then south 15 on the western coast, northeast 20 for the central and part of the eastern coast here, but get over to demarcation point, swings around to the west at 20 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet everywhere. And for tonight, rain shifting eastward here and beginning to increase over the Panhandle. Good chance of some moisture over a fair portion of the eastern interior tonight, right up, especially along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range and back here to the northwest with this trough axis. It actually extends all the way down to the eastern Aleutians. And tomorrow, that rain into the Panhandle, on Tuesday, with rain or snow, north slope, east side, and a weak system out over the Bering Sea.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.